Welcome to your weekly program, Bal'Ahdan, a show with an accent for those without one. We can really imagine what's happening in Gaza these days, almost a month now, bombardments from the Israelis, military machines, 1,300 been killed, and almost 7,000 injured. A lot of talk, a lot of media coverage, and how the Western media is really telling the story without really explaining the context, the history of this conflict. Very simplistic, always rationalize what's the Israelis doing. The atrocities committed by the Israelis really went beyond self-defense. And we have here, and we always assume all the Jews around the world, the reaction is really kind of one reaction and unanimous, supporting Israel. It's interesting to see how Jewish Americans react to what's going on in Gaza. We have here a very special guest. We have Karen Schraufnagel. She is an anti-Zionist Jew. She's an organizer of Minnesota Coalition for Palestinian Rights. Welcome to Bal'Ahdan.
Thank you for having me.
I know, when we say anti-Zionist Jew, what does that mean?
So the state of Israel is a Zionist state. Zionism is a political project that says that Jews have the exclusive right to the land of Israel.
God in the real estate business.
Right, God is in real estate. And so to identify as an anti-Zionist Jew is a deliberate way to be in the world, to try to distinguish between Zionism and Judaism. As you said, we assume that because someone's Jewish, they're Zionist. And you might also assume all Zionists are Jews. That's definitely not true either. There are lots and lots of Christian Zionists.
There are Zionist Muslims now and Zionist Arabs.
So Zionism is a political ideology. It's a little over about 120 years old, at least in its current manifestation. Judaism is a thousands and thousands of year old religion that some of us who were raised with strong Jewish values might argue the religion itself is really being corrupted by its identification with the state of Israel.
So what are you anti?
Don't support the policies of the state of Israel. I don't believe that a state can be exclusively for one religion, that's an explicitly racist project. The state of Israel, in addition to being racist, is also a colonial project. The Jews that run the state are Ashkenazi. Those are not the indigenous Jews of the region.
And all that. It's a colonial white project in the Middle East.
It's an imperial project. Yeah, it's why the U.S., I think, part of the reason the U.S. identifies so strongly with it.
So how spread that anti-Zionist Jews? We're talking about percentage-wise? Is it a big movement, or it comes and goes?
It's growing. I think before there was a state of Israel, there was more freedom to have different opinions about what the state would look like. And, I'm a socialist, and one of the things that Israel was supposed to be was kind of a socialist utopia. The whole kibbutz movement, I really identified with that as a young person. It's represented differently than how it is.
As you say, you were raised
Zionist.
Like a Zionist.
Yeah.
And when did you realize this is not really what you...
Well, it wasn't a sudden thing, but it was over the course of a couple of years, starting in the late 90s, and definitely by the time 9/11, just after 9/11, when Israel went into Jenin, by then I was pretty solidly anti-Zionist, but it was a transition. We talk about PEP, Progressive Except Palestine, and there are a lot of us. Jews have been traditionally very strong in civil rights movements, in all kinds of struggles for justice, but completely blind to the fact that Israel, the state they unconditionally support is a colonial, imperial, racist, all that's bad, all that's oppressive.
So, you know, when you look at what Israel is doing in Gaza, especially this time, this is very
yes.
massive atrocity.
Very bad, yes.
And how the justification of self-defense.
Right.
It's really kind of a mind-boggling for the son and the daughter of Holocaust and their experience in Germany. And you would expect there'll be more sympathy to the children and the women that have been slaughtered in Gaza.
You would expect. I mean, that's the thing when I was having this discussion with my family today when they, you know, said not to use the name anymore, that I did say, you know, I was raised with this whole notion of never again, and I was raised. You're imbued with the German Holocaust of the Jewish people when you grow up in this Jewish, and I just was raised with the idea of never again, but never again seems to mean different things to different people. I think to certain group of Jews, it means never again can this happen to the Jews, and not. I mean, that's ridiculous. To me, that's absurd.
To anybody.
Yes, it should mean never again will we stand by while innocent people are slaughtered. It's the very definition that calls us to act on Gaza. It's you would think that Jews everywhere would be shouting about what's happening in Gaza because we're not supposed to stand by while genocide is being committed.
So what's driving the Jewish support to misbehavior of Israel?
Well,
even
logically,
it's obviously it's a massacre. It is disproportionate reaction.
Right. So there's a couple of things. I think one is that the Israel narrative is unchallenged. And it requires, I think, in order to stand, it has to not be challenged because it falls apart pretty easily. So, but I think that, you know, you watch them when they do things like this. You saw it in Castlet and going back way before. First thing they do is they shut the press out of the area and they try to control the information that's coming out. And then they start talking about Hamas, rockets, and self-defense. And and Jews have, because of a history of persecution that is real and millennia long, when you talk self-defense, it triggers something. And they believe that Palestinians want to push the Jews into the sea. I was raised with that. I was raised with a land without a people for a people without a land. I was raised to believe the Jews want peace. My mother told me over and over again today, why isn't there a partner for peace? Well, you know, there's no partner for peace on the Israeli side. But the mythology is so flipped. And I was listening to this rabbi talk today on Democracy Now!, and an amazing man, who was saying, imagine flipping it. Imagine that it was the Jews. In fact, you don't have to imagine, because before there was a state of Israel, Jews were in terrorist organizations. And Menachem Begin, Shamir, they ran Ergun and they ran the Stern Gang, and then they became prime ministers of Israel. So when Netanyahu says about the young men who tortured Mohammed Khadr and set him on fire, you know, poured gasoline down his throat and set him on fire, which should be on the face of it just every minute. And just to Jews especially, given our history. But he said, here we punish criminals. Murderers will be punished. We don't name streets after them. We don't name schools after them. It's the opposite is true. They make them prime minister. They have plazas and streets and cities. And I mean, Herzl, there's Herzliya. Herzl's the father of modern Zionism. So.
Well, you mean, I'm just kind of wonder in the modern life of information age, how can they flip it that way? How can they have their narrative? Well, it's the only narrative there when you have access to information history.
That's why my mind is boggled by this too. But in the U.S., it's not that hard to hide from the real information. Mm-hmm. I think it's easier to get good information, but it's also, in this country, not that difficult to hide from it. If you, I mean, you read the New York Times, it says all the news that's fit to print right on the cover, so you think you are very well informed. And I've said this before, it's much more difficult to deal with people who are well misinformed than with people who know that they are not informed. Yeah. People who think something people who say, I don't know, and they want to learn, it's easy to tell them and it's easy for them to get it. But people who are well misinformed, have it inundated into their fiber of their being, an incorrect narrative, one side, and then they blame. This is shocking, but they don't, it's not that they don't see what's happening, but they blame Hamas, they blame the parents of it. When children are murdered, they blame their parents.
Do you see any analogy with people blaming like the Jew bankers, or greedy Jew for the Holocaust?
Well, that's why I say it's racist, because it takes this certain amount of dehumanization that makes it possible to not take any responsibility. And you mentioned it, the way the language is. So, you know, terrorists attack Israel viciously, target civilians. Israel can bomb a UN school, and there's no agency in the verbs that are used. You know, a UN school was hit, like it was an accident.
The buildings.
And if it comes out at all, then they say how Hamas uses human shields, how Hamas put children on the roof, you know, whatever. And
you know, the Dr. Lotz, this is very well-known propagandist that use language, and he has been used by the Republican.
Oh yeah, Frank Luntz. Yeah.
And he's now in Israel advising Netanyahu on how you use the language of just never admit, blame the Hamas. So is this like a war propaganda or
yeah,
what?
You know, I think Luntz is very good. He does focus group testing on language, and he's seen how words come over. My parents had never heard of him, but I told them about the death tax is his idea, pro-life is his, you know.
And also Israelis get killed and Palestinians die.
Right, exactly. So, you know, and you noticed it, going back to Gilad Shalit, he was supposedly kidnapped. Well, he was a soldier in a conflict zone.
That's not kidnapping.
That's taking a prisoner of war. But when they take, even before, when they were bombarding Gaza, but before the ground invasion, they picked up, I think, 11 legislators in the West Bank. That technically is kidnapping. You know, when you take people, and they've been doing it, of course, they have 9,000, 10,000 political prisoners inside Israel.
And half a minute left. Do you think Israel as a military apartheid state might be like the end of Zionism at some point?
I think that a lot of Jews who care about Zionism oppose Israel's actions because they believe that a kinder, gentler Zionism could save Zionism. That's why they don't support the occupation. They support two states. I believe that's past.
Oh, I see.
But yes.
Polarizing now.
Well, Israel is the one that has made two states impossible by the Bantustans, by the Swiss cheesification, as Sharon said, of the West Bank.
Karen Frank, thank you so much. Anti-Zionist Jew. She is. You actually came from a protest today.
Right, at Senator Franken's campaign headquarters.
Good luck with that.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll take a short break. We'll come back with the next guest. Assalamu alaikum, and God bless you all.
Wow.